if you think about a challenge, especially an emotional challenge or even a physical challenge, and say, "Oh, I have to climb that to get out of this hole." If you think back, you've probably done something like that before. Maybe it wasn't the same mountain or the same ladder, but maybe you had to climb out of a personal situation or a work situation or a mess with your kids where you weren't getting along and you have to find your way out. I always think that resilience is just using what you already know how to do and accessing that stuff.
Welcome to Radiant Mom Rising. Get ready to be inspired, empowered, and uplifted. I'm your host, Mary Dibble, and in each episode, we dive into amazing stories, insights, and conversations that help moms like you chase your dreams and embrace your worth. Let's rise and shine together. Welcome to another transformative episode of Radiant Mom Rising. I'm your host, Mary Dibble, and today we're diving into a topic that goes right to the heart of who we are and how we love. It's about the courageous journey of healing generational trauma and finding the truest version of ourselves in the process. I am so thrilled to be joined with a very special guest today, Tia Finn. Tia Finn is a life and trauma coach, genealogy expert, and published author on a mission to help others to resolve generational trauma and discover the secret upside of their often surprising generational inheritance. Tia's story is one of breaking through layers of pain and hidden family patterns to create a life that reflects hope, strength, and unconditional love. In our conversation, we talk about the hard truths, the healing work, and the beauty that unfolds when we bravely step into our own light. Let's dive into this powerful episode with Tia and discover what it means to heal from within for ourselves and for those who come after us. Welcome back to Radiant Mom Rising. Mary Dibble here, and I'm very excited to have Miss Tia Finn with me today. Thank you so much, Tia, for joining me on the show today. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great. Italy has decided to go from full on summer to fall in like 20 minutes. So leaves are falling. I wore a jacket today outside, which makes me very excited. And I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, I'm
Thanks so much
so
for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm so excited. I love the conversations we've had. I'm so thankful that I got to meet you. So I'm very intrigued with your story and everything about you. So I'm gonna let you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little about Tia.
Well, my name's Tia Finn, and I'm a life and trauma coach for a very long time. I'm an author. I like to think of myself as an activist, and uh, I don't know whether I should call myself a genealogy nerd or a pro, but that'll become clear as we talk. Let's say I started out as an amateur, but now I can help anybody find their great, 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 you name it, ancestor.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I'd love for us to go back in your story and tell us your journey that's led you down this path.
I'd love to. So I think, like many people, it started at a young age. I had trauma that I didn't know was trauma, like a lot of us, and I didn't deal with it. I just did what most women are taught to do is put your head down and move forward and just keep smiling and it'll get better. And back then, we didn't call it trauma. We called it patterns and cycles. So, when we started to actually have those conversations, so, I'm about to turn 70. So in my early teen years, I never heard the word trauma unless it was in a hospital. So when you started to hear that people had some problems and some issues and were struggling because of family, mostly in the family at a young age, it was because of patterns that had been handed down generationally, oftentimes things like alcoholism or abuse. So those are, and sometimes drug addiction. So you'd see those come up. And sometimes we're so desperate when we have those patterns and cycles in our lives not to repeat it that we create other habits that can be just as damaging in a different way. So here's an example. If you don't feel at home in your family, if you don't feel like you had familial love and support, then you go on to have your own family, it might turn into love bombing your kid, helicopter parenting, micromanaging your children because you want them to feel that support and never feel alone or lonely or not loved. So fast forward to the 80s, and we start to hear this term generational trauma. Now, I didn't actually know where that term came from. So when I was researching for my book, I researched where that term originated, actually originated with the Native Americans starting to talk about what had happened to their communities over the years and how that trauma was handed down from generation to generation. So that's where the term generational trauma comes from. And now it made sense to other communities that sort of experience a communal trauma, like people of color, marginalized groups, LGBTQ plus, people who had sort of like trauma that they could talk about and find some healing in that. So that segued further into now we talk about it for any kind of trauma that's handed down over the years from your parents, your grandparents. It's funny, sometimes you'll ask a parent, when did this happen to you? Why do you have these opinions or attitudes? And they'll say, well, my mother or my father or my grandmother or my grandfather, had this issue or had this problem, and this is how they handled it. And so then my mother handled it the same way. And we know all those stories, right? We know
Yeah.
all those cycles of abuse. So in the corporate world, I started to study how the different generations created different identities in the workplace. And it made it difficult at one point because in the 2000s, we started to have 4, 5, 6 generations in the workplace. And there is nothing like watching a boomer manager try to talk to a Gen Z new hire whose
Mhm.
first question in an interview might be, how much vacation do I get? Because priorities, right?
Yeah.
So that gave me a lot of experience, and it led me to understanding more about my own attitudes and behaviors and things like that. So I'd probably been working in a coaching role for 20 years before I actually decided to get some training. And I had a lot of experience, but I wanted to feel more solid in the way I was approaching the serious personal issues that people were starting to bring to me. I was a manager coach, an executive coach, and I did that kind of work a lot of the times. And all of a sudden, they're bringing me family problems or problems with their children or general relationship issues. So when I started finding these issues that I really didn't know if I was going to approach them in the right way, and I didn't want to do harm. So that's when I decided to get some training as a coach. And I studied with Martha Beck because she was quirky and funny, and almost everything she said resonated deeply in my soul.
Yeah.
And that's what we look for, right? We look for to learn from people that we have a connection with. And it would take me a while to realize that the training process really helped me work out a lot of my own issues that I had managed, like a lot of busy working moms, to bury. And I buried them pretty damn deep. As my kids got older, the journaling that I had started out doing, little memories that would come back as you're working through your traumas and things that kind of shaped you. I started journaling, and I've always been a writer, but this was more personal. And I highly recommend it if you're going through that period of like, maybe I need to look at why this is a trigger. Or maybe I need to understand why I have this sort of pattern of reacting to certain circumstances. And then I find myself saying that thing that my mom always used to say. And I always swore I'd never say that,
Yeah.
like if your friend told you to jump off a bridge, would you? And I remember my daughter saying, well, I did it because, my friend told me to do it. And that came out of my mouth so fast. It's such a learned behavior,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
So as they got older, I had a little more free time, and I wrote my first book over 6 years of momming and work travel. And even sometimes on vacation when the kids would be passed out from a day at the beach, I'd sit down and write. So I'm going to throw that out there that You don't have to be retired to write a book. You don't have to go off to the city and have a little pied a terre where you hide away and write your book like they do on television. Um, you can just write when you want, what you want, and eventually, if you have a story to tell, it'll show up for you. And that's what happened to me. That book helped me process everything that had happened to me in my early life and also in my teenage years. It's called Forgetting Andrew. It's on Amazon. It's had a nice little life. I self-published it because all I wanted to do was get it out of me and realize that we are not our trauma. We are everything that we do to survive the trauma. That's who we are at the end of the day. So that's so far, right?
Yeah,
So you,
yeah, it's incredible. Like it's nice to for you to show that, you've been able to turn the things that you've been through into something beautiful of creating a book about it that's an inspiration for people because that's really why I think we go through what we go through. It's meant to help others. It's meant to not just survive, but thrive. Like we don't have to be defeated. We don't have to be defined. We can't control, unfortunately, how other people behave or how they treat us. I mean, but we also have to be mindful of who we allow in our lives and what we allow and what we tolerate. And that is something I think even on my journey, I'm majorly learning right now is that I've allowed a lot of the people in my life to get away with treating me the way they do because I tolerated a lot of the expectations that I allowed them to think is okay. And all that caused was me having resentment or having poor relationships in the end with them. And I just love how you've learned along the way about the generational trauma, which I used to grow up, we would call it generational curse in our family because it was a very negative mindset, my generational history with my family.
Mhm.
Because like you say, again, abuse, neglect, not having that self-love or not knowing your self-worth. And I
Mm.
have been on a mission my whole life to be like positive as possible. But however, you're so correct about how we tend to fall into patterns that are just as bad in almost the opposite way. Or sometimes you don't even realize how you fall into those same negative patterns and it just shows up in your life and it shows up in you and the way you may treat your children. And it's kind of scary, but what's really powerful in this messaging, what we're talking about is how it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to stay that way,
Right.
right?
Well, I think everything that you just said is so important. We can't say it enough because as women, we were programmed to be nice,
Yeah.
to be quiet, to apologize. We were never trained to set boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's what I just heard you say. We are so bent on creating this life that's different from what we experience, especially when we start to have our own families, that we throw boundaries to the wind, I think, when we
Mhm.
start out. And it takes a while before you realize, like, oh, wait, I left the door open for that thing that
Mhm.
person just did.
Yeah.
And, little things that have become memes, sometimes I think I speak in memes. No is a complete sentence. Took
Yeah.
me eons to learn that. People pleasing, I can teach you how to do that. I'm a pro.
Totally.
Uh, but now, those boundaries I keep them in front of me to remind myself. Trauma's not one and done. You
Mm.
know, those little messages will come up, pop up, triggers. I should mention at this point, if I ramble now and again, I had a traumatic brain injury about 20 years ago. And because I was in a difficult relationship, let's see, that's code for abusive, I didn't get a chance to go see a doctor when it happened. And it was almost 15 years till another circumstance when I was long past that relationship. I started to have some cognitive issues that were scary to me. And so I went to see a neurologist in London. And the UK is very different medically. Like the doctor's in the room with you when you're having a scan, and then they talk to you for like 20 minutes or an hour. Coming from the States for so many years, that was a big shock. So we were looking at an issue with my shoulder, and at a certain point, he turned to me and he said, "The good news is, look at the CAT scan. Your brain injury is really doing much better." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" And he was like, "Well, yeah, like, see here." And I guess a neurologist can look at a scan and say, "This is where the blood was. And now you have what looks like a coffee ring." And I can tell where it was, and it's a lot smaller. And
Wow.
literally, I was just part of the brain injury that happened to me is that those synapses don't always connect right away. It might take me a minute to find a word. That's what was happening at work. I was like, oh my God, I have to write down every word they say or I'm going to blow it, you know? And it turned out that as your brain absorbs the blood that has been distributed through injury or trauma to the brain, as it absorbs, those nerves that were soaked start to dry out. And when they dry out, then they can sort of reach across and reconnect. And so for someone like me, I will get a flash of memory that comes out of nowhere that I haven't had for 20 years. So that was a huge learning curve. And it becomes really relevant to our conversation because it was a major factor in my new book, in in what I decided to write about. So we left off. My kids are grown up now. My daughter's out of the house, out of college even. My son is 19, just graduated high school, but out on his own. And I get an opportunity to go to London. I spend 6 years there and decide to retire and move to Italy. Then I make a really, really, one of those life decisions that you look back and go, what was I thinking? But there's no way any of us knew what was coming in January of 2020. So I had moved everything I owned from London to Italy. I'm half Italian. I qualify for citizenship. That's why. And it was winter and I had some things to do in the States. So I didn't want to hurry up and find an apartment and then leave. So I put everything in storage. And that was January 10th, 2020. And then went back to London, closed up the flat, and went back to the States to see my kids, sell a house, visit some friends, visit my editor, do a bunch of things because I knew once I settled down here, I wasn't going to be going back all the time because work wasn't going to pay for it anymore. And 4 days after I got to Arizona, or actually, where was I? Yeah, I was in Arizona where my kids are. And Italy was in lockdown because COVID had
Mhm.
entered the auditorium, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
And none of us knew what that was going to be. I called it the detour, the big detour. So, like everybody, we were all kind of figuring out where do we land. I had just sold a house, so I rented a little house. I worked on the election. So, that was a great way to spend the fall. And then there's a challenge that happens in the US every year called National November Writing Month. And if you've never heard of it, you might have heard of NaNoWriMo. It's not a competition. There's no prizes. It's just a challenge to writers. Can you write 50,000 words in a month, in the month of November? And as a working mom and a professional and a coach, I was always too busy. But now I had, oh, who knew how long laying out in front of me. So I decided, why not? But then I wasn't sure if I'd had another book in me. I had stories. Ask anybody who knows me. I can tell you stories all day long, every day. But did I have another book or even 50,000 words? I wasn't really sure. And then this is going to sound woo woo, but woo woo happens. I had a dream. And in that dream, a woman I didn't see, I felt like maybe it was me, walked into a cafe, a dark, moody place. And two of my grandmothers were sitting at a table, both of whom are dead, long dead. And there were four other women I didn't know. Well, I didn't know them then. I know them now. And one of them looked at me and said, well, finally, we were wondering when you'd show up. And I spent about a week trying to figure out what that was about. And then I realized that I had spent a lot of time doing research on my family. My dad he'd been a big genealogy person before the internet. He'd done things like travel to courthouses to get records, and we had a lot of information, but we also had a lot of family lore, the stories that you all have. Your parents said, "Oh, Uncle Jim, he was a character. Let me tell you about him." Or Aunt Susie, yeah, we couldn't keep her out of jail. And sometimes they'd give you the details and sometimes they wouldn't. And in my family, it was no different. So over the next few days, I thought about how hard it is to navigate a brain injury and how much it had helped me during the years after I found out what was going on with me. I was doing a lot of this research into my family. And I thought I would write a story about both those things, which sounds weird, but basically, that's how the Grandmother Files was born. So a woman goes through a horrific um, tragedy and kind of loses her way, doesn't know how she's going to go on, doesn't know if she wants to go on. She has a lot of physical injury. She has a lot of emotional trauma, and she has a brain injury, very similar to what I did. And all I can say is when somebody says brain fog, it calls up a visual image, and it's exactly the right image because that's what you feel like. You feel completely normal 1 minute, and then you feel like you don't know where you are or who you are, or you're searching for words, you're searching for feelings. A lot of times you go very numb because those nerves aren't connected and they're not telling your brain to feel sad. The brain is wired a certain way to process grief so that we don't die ourselves when we're, grieving something really important to us. And when you have a brain injury, it doesn't work that way. So it becomes a long, drawn out process. So as I learned more about my own grandmothers and what they'd survived and how, I realized that some of the things I thought helped me were qualities that they had in huge amounts, especially in the times they were living in. And I started to focus in on two stories that my family had handed down, one on my mom's side and one on my dad's side. And those stories are the basis for the first book in what is now a series of three, because there were just too many stories to tell.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
Um, I think if we look to our ancestors, we can learn a lot about ourselves and about these qualities that help us get through things. I used to teach a lot at the corporate level, and people will ask me about how are some people so resilient? And I said, well, what do you think resilience is? And they're like, you can just come back from anything. You just kind of put it behind you and come back. And I'm like, the reason that we're able to do that, resilience is just really like having a mental Rolodex of things you've already done.
Ooh, I
If
love
you think about a challenge, especially an emotional challenge or even a physical challenge, and say, oh, I have to climb that to get out of this hole. If you think back, you've probably done something like that before. Maybe it wasn't the same mountain or the same ladder, but maybe you had to climb out of a personal situation or a work situation or a mess with your kids where you weren't getting along and you have to find your way out. I always think that resilience is just using what you already know how to do and
Wow.
accessing that stuff. So I had one grandmother that was extraordinarily resilient, resourceful, creative, not in the way that maybe I am or you are. She wasn't a writer, but she created miracles in a life where her family lost the family farm and had to find a way out of it. And nobody ever understood how they found the way out of it, but I found out how she found the way out of it, and it's in the book. Not going to give you any spoilers.
That's awesome.
So, what started as one book that covered 5 women who affect the main character's life, I quickly realized that I had to keep going because the stories were so great. So, the first book is both sides of my family, the Italian and the American. And these characters are based on my family. They are not my family. So a lot of it is a writer's privilege to write fiction. And the second book will focus more on the Scottish, English, Irish, ancestry that I have. And the final book will take place here in Italy because they don't put their records on the internet. You got to go to the church and
Wow.
sit with the priest. Then you got to have enough language, which I'm getting there. So, um,
Wow.
Hey, Mama, I want to share something that could truly transform your life: the Mom Biz Mastery course and community. If you're a mom with dreams of starting a business or already juggling your business with the demands of family life, I see you. I know the struggles, the school runs, endless to-do lists, and those stolen moments to work on your passion. It's overwhelming, and some days it feels like you're constantly pulled between your family and your dreams. But here's the thing, you don't have to do this alone. Mom Biz Mastery was created to help you reclaim time for yourself while building a business that lights you up without burning out. It's packed with practical, actionable strategies tailored to your busy life. Whether you're still figuring things out or ready to take your business to the next level, this course is your step-by-step guide. And you won't just be going through this journey solo. You'll be part of a powerful community of moms who get it, with expert coaching, real advice, and connections that fit into your life. You'll have the support you need to thrive. You deserve this, Mama. You deserve to chase your dreams and build a life and business you love. Click the link in the show notes or reach out to me for a free consultation. Let's chat and see if this is the right fit for you. Your dreams are possible, and I'm here to help make them a reality.
when I talk about the book, we always end up having a conversation where I ask people, where do you think you got your ability to navigate change so well? Or have you always been so resourceful or creative? Or, boy, I've always thought you're brave. Where do you think that comes from? And then we start talking about other women in their family. And yeah, sometimes it's a guy, sometimes it's a man, but almost always we find that we look to the women in our family to model our behaviors. The ones that we see are positive. The ones that we see, I've heard so many women say, my mom didn't have anything when she got divorced. But man, we always had clean clothes and we always had food on the table. And, she never really let us see
The
how
struggle.
hard it was for her.
Yeah.
She just let us see the joy she got in giving us what she thought we needed. So there you go. If you really think about it, we inherit so much more
Yeah.
than the shape of our face or the way that we make a face.
Yeah.
If I look at my daughter, she has some of my same facial expressions,
I
so
see.
much more than the color of our eyes, even.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think the best thing about that concept is it's a constant reminder to me when I'm facing a challenge and I think I don't know how to do this one. I go back and think about those women that I've now learned so much about. So a lot of people ask me, how can I find out what I inherited, what this generational inheritance that is the best part of what is handed down to us? It starts with conversations.
Yeah.
Talk to anybody who's still with you. Try to get them to talk, ask them questions. There's some nice guides out there, different books and stuff. I bought it for my sister last year.
Yeah.
It's called Storyworth. And basically, you sign up for a year, and Storyworth sends the person an email prompt. I think it's twice a month,
Mm-hmm.
once or twice a month. And then at the end and they can respond by answering the question, like, what was your first job? Or where did you meet your husband? Or what kind of family do you have? What was your favorite childhood memory? Things that a lot of times people aren't real comfortable answering in person,
Yeah.
especially my grandparents' generation. They didn't talk about a lot.
Yeah.
They wanted to leave it behind, especially if it was difficult. And then at the end of the year, Storyworth puts that into a book. So you have it I got it for my sister so her son would have it.
Oh, that's neat. Oh, I love
It's,
that. That's
yeah, you have to
awesome.
have somebody who's willing to sit down and do that.
Yeah.
You can also talk to people who knew those people in your life. Talk to an aunt or a cousin or, brother or sister who might be older than you, and they might have had more contact with your grandparent. And then you can start using one of the sites like ancestry.com or genealogy.com, 23andMe. You can start with your DNA. because sometimes that brings a surprise
Oh, yeah.
and a question. And you can start with those stories. One of my great grandmothers left behind a huge mystery that no one had solved until I followed a trail in Ancestry. And I'll let you read the book to find out what happened, but it was a giant surprise to our whole family.
Oh,
Nobody suspected this. Um,
that's
and I
sweet.
think it's so worth it to unravel those family myths and legends and even to make peace with uncomfortable truths. Sometimes you find something and you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
and you want to back up away from that. Well, we don't have to look at that.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't make peace with it, it's always kind of hovering out there.
Mm, oh,
So
yeah.
I think, like you said, it's funny when you were saying it, I was like, yeah, to me, that's the whole moral of the story. Nothing can erase the trauma
Yeah.
that we experience or even witness. It adds to the layers of who we become, but embracing the gifts of our ancestors
Yeah.
can help us find courage and wisdom and resilience. And then we can build the life we really want
Yeah.
and always have those tools in our toolbox.
Exactly. And there's so many tools. There's so many also good people out there who will help you along the way. Like we don't have to keep going through these things by ourselves. I feel like
Yeah.
as a mom especially, we tend to just isolate ourselves. We just expect that no one's really going to show up for us, so we don't even try. We don't even like I'm guilty of that. So I've been burned a lot from people that I thought would be there for me, that I thought were my friends. And so because of that experience for so long, I held back from when I met new people, like really putting myself out there, really opening myself to them. Even in relationships with guys, I was like that. I always had this wall up. And I had to really work on that. And you're right. I went one thing you said earlier about how when you went through the process of becoming certified as a life coach, I think that's such a neat path to take because you actually end up working on yourself so much in that process and you learn so much, you grow so
Absolutely.
much. The transformation from that was so amazing. From even just outside of meeting with the coach, it was like, oh my goodness, like not only am I learning this stuff that I can use to help other people, but it's really helping me too. And it's about getting real with yourself too. Like a lot of us want to either blame other people, like, because this was done to me, this is why I'm this way. But at
Right,
the end of
right.
the day, we have to also take responsibility and accountability for who we are, who we want to be, and decide, are we going to continue to respond and act this way, or are we going to choose to work on a new habit, a new way of being and seeing the world as well too, because our perspectives is a huge part of the realities that we create for ourselves. And again, that was another part of the process that really opened my eyes to realizing, oh man, I'm creating my own reality just by what I believe. Like
You can't.
yeah, I'm struggling financially because I have a bad relationship with money.
Ah, I think that was one of the big ahas,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Was that moment where someone said, and we've heard it a million times, and it almost always comes up in coach training, is
Yeah.
that, especially because you'll have clients and you'll say, do you feel this way when this happens? And they'll say yes. And I'm like, would you like that to change? And I started to realize I had a whole group of people that were called, I called them in my head, yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to,
But
but I can't do that.
oh yes,
And if
the
we don't look, we,
yeah.
the saying, and I won't get it perfect, is we cannot change what we will not examine.
Ooh.
So you also don't know, like you said about the wall, that one really rings a bell for me because I know about it. I know what caused it. I know how difficult it was to take it down, but I still find myself doing it in situations where I fear getting hurt. Because if you've been through something, and you have to learn what those things look like and what they feel like in your body, and to recognize that mind body connection so that you can back up, you can look at it, and you can say, I love the work of Byron Katie,
Mhm.
who her website is called thework.com. And it's great because there's lots of free worksheets. And if you just give them a chance, they're really great. It's about reframing your thoughts. And really, gift that I give to all my free clients now because I'm not really coaching on a regular basis. I am writing a lot about trauma and this process and my journey on my author website. But I tell people that when you get a negative thought or a limiting belief or a story in your head about something that's happened before, so example, yeah, this guy asked me out, but every time I'm in a relationship, it just doesn't work out. I think it's me. I don't think it's them. Yeah, it's definitely me. Something's wrong with me. When you get to that point, there's only one question you need to ask yourself. Is that true? It's not true. You can almost never say it's true.
Yeah.
And the second question is, can you absolutely know it's true if you're one of those people who go, yeah, it's true. It's me. It's always me. And it's that process of every time you end up in the place that somehow spins you around to where it's you, it's your fault.
Yeah.
You're never going to change. You're not going to, I mean, you're walking proof of, yeah, you can change your life. You can design your life, but you can't do any of that until you face
Yeah.
what's broken or what somebody else broke or whatever. And there's another thing that I learned in Martha Beck training during one of her summits. I used to go to the workshops I didn't want to go to. Excuse me. Because I thought that's what I'm supposed to go learn. And a wonderful woman named Christina Brandt did a labyrinth exercise. And I'd never walked a labyrinth. Have you? I highly recommend this to anybody who's listening and anybody who's a coach, anybody who is sorting through their life so that they can find their way. I grew up with a heavy dose of outsider syndrome. I always felt like I was different. I was told I was different. I always felt like I lived on the fringes of things. So you go in this labyrinth and you walk any path you want, and the goal is to leave something there and take something away. Some emotion, whatever, you can write it down. Yeah. You can just think it. And I'm walking around, and I was just about to finish my coach training and my certification. So I had a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts. And I'm wandering and wandering. There were no time limits. And all of a sudden, I opened my eyes and like really focus, and I'm on the outside ring of this huge labyrinth. There's all kinds of people walking through this labyrinth, but I'm on the outside. And it really just hit me like, wow, here I'm here where I'm meant to be, and I'm doing things to really make myself heal and find my direction, but I'm on the outside. And I got very emotional. So I exited and I went and sat down. We were all sitting in a ring around it. And Christina came up to me and put her hand on my shoulder, and she could tell I was emotional. And she asked me what was going on. And I said, no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, I'm always on the outside. I'm always on the outside. And she said, darling, that's because you get to see where all the pain is from the outside. You're far enough away that you know where your work is. You can see it. And if you were in the middle of it, you'd never find it. Life changing.
Yeah. What a beautiful reframe. I love that.
Yeah. So, and anybody can do that. Anybody can find a way to reframe and work through. And I think two of us trauma survivors, and there's a million other ones out there, other people out there that are probably going, oh, wow, that happened to me. Oh, wow, I feel that way too. Yeah. Just know that. Take your time. Give yourself some grace. You are not your trauma. You're not your mistakes. You're what you decide to do.
Oh yeah. And anyone who try to make it be like it's your fault, it's not your fault. Like you didn't deserve any bit of that at
Those
all.
are not your people.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah. And it's sad because I think one of the hardest times I had after I finally left my abuse and started really working on myself was when I realized that I am attracting who I am. And if I want to attract my soulmate, then I had to realize that I had to work on me. Like I had to love myself. I had to treat myself in the way I would want a man to treat me first and foremost. And I had to become the woman I would want to be for him. And that was kind of crazy for me because I never loved myself. I always had a low
Mm.
self-esteem. I had insecurities. I was like you. I felt like an outsider, like I never fit in with anybody really. I just always hated on myself. And
Mm.
it's funny, even to this, even there's moments that I'll still catch myself trying to be a little critical
Mm.
of myself because we are our own worst critics all the time. But at the same
Mhm.
time, I love now having this new perspective. And I've worked so many years on myself to be like, no, Mary, you're beautiful. You're amazing. Be quiet. You're awesome.
It's
Like,
that thing where we say,
yeah,
"Oh, I'm working on my body." I remember the moment that it hit me. The work is continuous. I
yeah,
think you made a really good point. It's continuous. We're never done because we're
yeah,
never, if you stop growing and learning, what's the point of
exactly.
anything?
Exactly.
Trust me, I moved to England when I was 60. I thought I knew everything. Oh, hello. No. Oh, hello. The universe was right there to say, "Oh, bet you didn't see this one coming." And that's life.
Yeah.
We take chances, we
Hmm.
plan our pathway as best we can, and then whoop, COVID or whoop, something else. You go with grace as best you can.
Yeah.
And I remember the moment where somebody was asking me why I wasn't dating in London, which is almost impossible. And I was like, my brain was having this conversation with myself and saying, well, maybe when you're in better shape, maybe when you get your body just right. And I heard a voice, I swear to you, I heard a voice say, maybe when you get your soul right,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? Just what you just said. Maybe when you love yourself enough
Yeah.
to do
Because
whatever you want, whether that is, and listen, some of us want to be single. Some of us want to have a life that we didn't get to have earlier because of other things. Some of us want to carve our own path and figure out, just let life happen. There is no there is no rule. There are no rules. Thank God we live in that world, right?
yeah.
People may try to make rules for ourselves, for each other, but I think we're very blessed to live in a world where we can explore all of these things and we can talk openly like you and I,
Yeah.
and it's not a badge of shame anymore. It's the badge of honor because we're here.
Yeah. And this is the
We're
space I'm really working to create because unfortunately, there are places that still and people out there who still will not allow you to express who you are. But that's why we're really pushing for us to have that space and that right and the permission to show up as who we are and embrace it and love it and love each other and be kind. Because, yes, I know we're not always going to agree on things, and that's fine. I mean, I don't expect anyone to think and see things as I do. Yes, I may share that I have an opinion on things, but it doesn't mean that I'm gonna hate somebody just because they disagree with me, And it's just nice because I think that's what's kept so many people from showing up for themselves is because they're so afraid of what everyone else is going to think or how people are going to judge them. Lord knows me, I kept myself back for so long because I was worried about what my family would think or would they
mm,
even support me. And you know what? Most of my family don't even support me right now. And that's sad, but you know what? That's okay because I am very blessed. I love the journey that I'm on, the path that I'm on, and I have met some of the most incredible women who support me, and I love that. And that is the beauty of what we're working on. That is the beauty of what I'm choosing to believe in and to follow. And I'm excited. Like, and the fact that you're right, no matter how old you are or where you go in life, you're always learning, you're always growing. And that's actually kind of exciting because that means that
the
there's
fact that
always
you're
more.
creating a space for those women who carry that
Yeah.
fear of judgment, carry the dreams that they don't think they have a right to or they don't know how to, but you're giving them a space to talk about that openly, to listen to other women who've figured a way out or through. I mean, we're all just walking each other home, as they say,
Yeah.
but it's also we're all walking each other through
Mhm.
what we're going through. There's so much in this world right now. And I'm really so happy. I was so happy to meet you and see that you're doing. I mean, when I was a mom, a young mom, I mean, there was nothing like what you've built and the people that you're bringing in to talk to women. And, if there's something that they find in what I said or what Monica said about empathy, I mean, that's a gift you're giving to the world. So, yay.
Thank you. Truly, thank you. It's what I'm on a mission for. It means the world to me. Like even if there's just one person that I can make them feel good about themselves, make them realize their potential and just make that decision for themselves that, you know what, today's going to be the day that I'm going to go after this dream, or I'm going to, take some self-care for me and live my life for me, because we matter too. And it's like, enough's enough. Like, stop putting yourself on the back burner. Stop feeling like you're not allowed to want to be wealthy or successful, or you're not allowed to have time by yourself because that makes you a bad mom. No, like, I want to really get to a place where we just find that support and that uplifting for each other, because we all deserve it. We all deserve it, and we're all worthy of it. It's truly been an honor meeting you. I'm so excited. So this is what's so cool too about putting yourself out there and trying new things, because I would have never met you had I not decided to go after this one, a direction, talking about pitching and doing things like that, getting yourself out there more, because that's what I'm interested in learning about. So it's so neat how people cross each other's paths, and I'm truly
Right. Two
grateful. And
people completely out
exactly,
of their
right?
comfort zone.
Exactly. And
So,
off,
oh,
yeah, right.
hi.
I know. I love it. I love it. And I'm excited for the continuation of getting to meet new people and also connecting with you continuously after this. So, but before we end the show here, I'd love for you to share a little bit if anyone's interested in learning more about you. I know we'll share your links, of course, for your books for Amazon, but tell us how we can find you.
Well, I've just gone through a huge change to all my websites because I was a career coach primarily for the last probably 6 years before I retired. So now you can find me at tiafinnauthor.com. The updated website will go live tomorrow, and which I don't know what day this will come out, but let's just say I think October 1st, the new website will be up for sure. So it's tiafinnauthor.com. I just updated because there is a blog that's called All About Italy, which is all about my journey to come live in a foreign country and learn the language and all the ins and outs. It's kind of fun. And then there is a blog called The Gift of the Grandmothers that talks about my journey through being a trauma coach, understanding my own trauma, finding the grandmothers, and what led me to write the book. I I will tell you this. If you have a book in you, if you have a story in you that you think might help one person, when I wrote Forgetting Andrew, I wrote it for myself, but I also wrote it so that people could see that you can live through what you think is the worst thing and come out the other end and find a beautiful life. And I cannot tell you, I meet people on trains, and my PR person is always saying, talk about the book, talk about the book. And it's not a comfort thing for me, but I started telling people if I'm having a conversation, oh yeah, I wrote a book. And I'll get emails out of the blue saying, thank you for writing this story, because I went through something like that and I didn't think I'd ever find what you found.
Yeah.
So you never know, like you
Yeah.
said, you never know where your story will land for somebody, and maybe it's not the whole book, maybe it's one chapter.
Yeah.
One woman wrote to me and said, I had a dad like yours, because there's a lot about my family in it. That
Yeah.
book, the names are changed to protect the innocent, not so innocent, but it is my story, and people are just like, I've had strangers hug me.
Yeah, I bet so. I mean, this is
So,
part of why we do what we do. And it's funny you said that about that was not your cup of tea, like sharing about your story. That was hard for you. I felt the same way even when I started my podcast originally, because I was like, I didn't want to bother people to be like, oh, go listen to my podcast, things like, things like that. I felt weird about it. Like, oh, they're going to think I'm trying to sell to them, whatnot. And it was like, oh, I didn't want to come off that way. But at the same time, I had to come to that realization, like, Mary, your message, it's not even just about me. It's about my guests. It's about getting their story out there. It's about inspiring moms and helping them to feel good about themselves. And so when you realize, like you say, that this is affecting people and impacting their lives in such a positive way, how can you not scream it out the top of your lungs and let
it
everyone
gets
know you got to
easier.
check this out? Yeah, which is why now I'm like, yeah, please. And I'm reaching out like, hey, I got this podcast. If you're as a mom, like, check it out. It can really inspire you on your journey. And it's exciting to shift from that and realize like the importance. It's almost like a moral obligation for us to share and help as many people as we can. So I think it's amazing. I'm excited to share that for sure. And is there any final thoughts, or anything you would love to summarize from our conversation for anyone
I
listening?
just think that, I'm the poster child for the name of my coaching business was Life Happens Now, because that's the reality, right?
Yep.
I can't predict what'll happen to you or me or anybody that we know. We can just kind of show up, be present, and try to give our best to whatever situation happens. And you can do that no matter what the past has done to you. You have that in you. I always say we already know how to do what's right. We just have to stop a minute. Sometimes we're going so fast we don't remember what we already know and how good we can be for other people. I think you're doing that even when you're insecure, even when you're afraid, even when you're not sure, even when you don't think you have the support. It's worth it to show up. You got to decide how you want the world to remember you.
Mm.
And I just want the world to remember me as someone who was kind, who was generous with their, you know, ability to listen and maybe offer some things you learn by the time you're 69 years old. I think that's it. Think about how you want to be remembered. Don't be afraid. Everybody out there, has been through something and you're still here. So keep going.
There you go. That's beautifully said. Beautifully said, Tia. Thank you so much
I
again
told you
for
I could
joining.
talk.
I love it. No, thank you so much again for being a part of my
Thank
show.
you so much. It's been really fun. And you're right. It was just a conversation, but it was a great one.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Take care.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Here are the key takeaways from today's episode. Recognize hidden trauma. Many of us, like Tia, have experienced trauma we didn't recognize as such, pushing it down and moving forward. Reflect on your own experiences and consider how past events may influence current behaviors. Trauma can be generational, often passed down through family behaviors or attitudes. Reflect on your family's pattern and ask yourself how they may be affecting your life today. Whether that's through helicopter parenting, lack of boundaries, or other inherited tendencies. Although past trauma or family patterns can feel inescapable, you have the power to break the cycle. Tia's work highlights how intentional actions such as boundary setting, self-reflection, and addressing generational issues can transform your relationships and parenting. Tia recommends journaling as a powerful way to process past experiences and recognize patterns in your reactions. Taking the time to write down your thoughts can offer insights into why you respond in certain ways, helping you make conscious changes. Setting boundaries. Women are often socialized to be nice and accommodating, yet setting boundaries is essential for self-respect and healthy relationships. Practice saying no confidently, and remember, as Tia shares, no is a complete sentence. Healing takes time and effort. Healing from trauma isn't a one-time event. It is a process. With every new realization or trigger, you have another chance to grow. Whether through coaching, therapy, or self-reflection, commit to ongoing self-care and growth. Tia found that her coaching journey helped her address her own deeply buried issues, showing that helping others can be a path to healing yourself. Consider how you can use your own journey to inspire and support those around you. Your story matters. Writing a book or simply recording your experiences can be healing and empowering. Tia's experience shows that your voice and story are valuable and that sharing them can be impactful for both you and others. Understanding that terms like generational trauma often originate from marginalized community helps frame this issue within a broader social context. Recognize how collective experiences affect us all and reflect on how your background shapes your identity. Find your inspiration for growth, whether through a trusted coach, therapist, or a mentor. Connect with someone who resonates with you to support your healing journey. Surround yourself with positive influences who can help guide you through your self-discovery and growth. If you want to learn more about Tia, be sure to visit her at tiafinnauthor.com. Show your support and grab a copy of her book today. We would greatly appreciate it if you would share this episode with someone you know who would find value from it. Also, please leave us a 5-star rating and let us know what was your favorite takeaway. If you need any support in your journey as a life coach, I'm here to help you. Visit me at marydibblecoaching.com today to learn more. Thank you so much for tuning in. It means the world to me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Until next time, much love.